Welcome to Massive Passive Cash Flow, the podcast that guides professionals to financial prosperity. Join our community and let's start building your wealth. Here's your host, Gary Wilson.
Welcome back to the Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast. I'm Gary Wilson, your host, and I'm glad you're back and listening to the podcast. If you wouldn't mind, if you haven't already done so, let's go ahead and subscribe to the podcast when you get a chance. It's on 30 different channels, including the one you're listening to. So go ahead and do that. That would be awesome. And by the way, we've got a great guest today for you, Mark Podolsky. We call him the land geek. So we're going to talk about real estate investing and maybe focus a little bit on the land part of that as well. So first off, Mark, I just want to say thank you for joining us. I know you're a successful guy. I know you're busy. And that means we're lucky to have you. So thank you for doing this,
Gary, thanks so much for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Good. Hey, I appreciate that. If you wouldn't mind, give the listeners a little bit of a background, like even like where you're from, what part of the world you live in, but also how did you arrive at where you are? Like what most of us come from, writing software or being a manager or something like that, and we got into this sort of indirectly. What was your story? What is your story, I should say?
Yeah, if we rewind the tape to 2000, I was a miserable, micromanaged 45-minute commute to work and back investment banker, specializing in mergers and acquisitions with private equity groups. And Gary, it got so bad for me that I wouldn't get the Sunday blues anticipating Monday coming around. I'd get the Friday blues anticipating the weekend going by really fast and having to be back at work on Monday. So my firm hires this guy, and he's telling me that as a side hustle, he's buying up raw land, pennies on the dollar. He's flipping them online, and he's making a 300% return on his money. And Gary, I'm looking at companies all day long, and a great company, has 15% EBITDA margins or free cash flow. Average companies, 10%. I'm looking at companies all day long, less than 10%. So of course, I don't believe him. So I go with him to New Mexico. I've got $3,000 saved up for car repairs, and I do exactly what he tells me to do. I buy 10 half-acre parcels, an average price of $300 each. I flip them online, and they all sell for an average price of $1,200 each. 300%, it worked. So I took all that money and went to another auction, and this is in Arizona, which is where I live. I live in Scottsdale, Arizona. Okay. And again, this is 2000. There's no one in the room, and I'm buying lots and acreage for nothing. I sell all that property, and I make over $90,000 cash. So I go to my wife. She's pregnant. I said, honey, I'm going to quit my job and become a full-time land investor. And she said, absolutely not. So I said, okay. So it took 18 months for the land investing income to exceed the investment banking income. And then I quit. I've been doing it full-time ever since. I've done over 6,000 transactions and counting, and absolutely love it.
Wow. Well, that's amazing. Well, I love the Scottsdale area. I've been there many times teaching, visiting just for fun. One of my favorite places is Taliesin West. That's the Frank Lloyd Wright
Sure.
home and grounds just outside of Scottsdale in Paradise Valley area. And it's just an amazing place. And anybody that's interested in real estate, if you're ever in the greater Phoenix Metroplex, you definitely have to go to that area. And while you're there, visit Scottsdale because it is an awesome, awesome little town, man.
Yeah, for sure.
So, hey, so then that's a pretty compelling story, especially for me because I've always focused on improved land. Land that has the fourplex or the house I'm going to flip and things like that. But I've never really done just the raw land. And as you're speaking, I'm thinking there's some real advantages there. Like number one, if you flip raw land, you don't have tenants, you don't have toilets, you don't have occupancy inspections, you don't painters and turnover and vacancies and all that kind of stuff. So could you dive in a little bit into the I guess you call it the commodity of the asset of land? Like what was it that drew you to it? I know you just talked about the guy that you learned from, but did you compare it with others? Did you ever try flipping and rentals too? And land was just like that's the thing for you?
Yeah, I never did really anything else. I tried, I think it was 2005. I did a house flip. And this is when the market was really fat, like really, going crazy. And I made $100,000 on that flip. But I remember having to drive out every other day watering plants, meeting the subcontractors. And I absolutely hated it. And then I started factoring in my time. I'm like,
Hmm.
this is a terrible use of my time when I can
Hmm.
do a few land deals and I'm just, shuffling paper and making money. And I don't have to go anywhere. And it can all be done, with my inexpensive laptop and an internet connection. So after that, I become an inch wide and a mile deep. And,
Hmm.
you know, I know, look, I'm the most boring guy at the party. The multifamily guys, the house flippers, the landlords, it's a way
Yeah.
sexier niche. But for me, I like the fact that, like you said, I don't have to deal with any renters, rehabs, renovations, rodents. There's nothing to maintain, nothing to protect. And I get this one-time sale and I get passive income every single month without the headaches.
Yeah. Well, that sounds pretty awesome. And I want to, if you don't mind, I actually was looking at some of your information, and one of the statements I saw was three ways to free yourself from solo economic dependency. So is this one of the three ways, or the three ways all related to this one particular strategy, or um,
Yeah. This is one of the three ways. So sole economic dependency is when if you're personally not working, you're not making any money, right?
yeah.
So anybody with a job, freelancers, we can pick on people who've solved their money problems, but not their time problems, right? Doctors, lawyers. Let's pick on the dentist. The dentist's hands aren't in the patient's mouth. The dentist isn't generating any revenue. And so the escape
Yeah.
is creating enough passive income where it exceeds your fixed expenses. And then you're working because you want to, not because you have to. And so, Gary, what I can do is I can walk you step by step through the model so that you and the
Okay.
listeners can just replicate it.
Okay. That sounds
So,
good to me.
so Gary, where,
Yeah.
where do you live?
Well, that's a good question. Right now, I split my time between Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Florida. Right now, I'm currently in Virginia. Yeah.
Okay, so let's say you're in Virginia,
Hmm.
and let's say that you own 5 acres of raw land, and let's say it's in Florida, but you
Hmm.
really don't ever go back. You don't go back to Florida. We'll just pretend, and you owe
Hmm.
$200 in back taxes. So you're advertising two important things to me. Number one, you have no emotional attachment to that raw land. You're in
Hmm.
Virginia, properties in Florida. And number two, you're distressed financially in some weird way. Because when you don't
Hmm.
pay for your property taxes, you don't value it in the same way. And as a result, the county treasurer keeps sending you notices saying, Gary, if you don't pay your property taxes, you're going to lose that property to a tax
Hmm.
deed or a tax lien investor. So all I'm going to do is look at the comparable sales on your parcel in Florida for the last 12 to 18 months. And I'm going to take the
Hmm.
lowest comparable sale. Let's just say it's $10,000. And then I'm going to divide by four. And that's going to get me what Warren Buffett would call a 300% margin of safety. So I'll send you an actual offer of $2,500. Now you
Hmm.
accept it. Why? Because for you, $2,500 is better than nothing. In reality, 3 to 5% of people will accept my quote unquote top dollar offer. But now
Okay.
that you've accepted it, I have to go through due diligence or in-depth research. I have to confirm you still own the property. I have to confirm back taxes are only $200. I have to make sure there's been uh, no breaks in the chain of title, no liens or encumbrances. And it seems like, oh, this is going to be a lot of work. I outsource it to my team in Jamaica. They're connected to an American title company. It costs about $11. Now, if I was investing more than $5,000, I would close traditionally through a title company and let them do all the title work. But this is only $2,500, so I'll take a little bit of title risk. And they typically don't have a very long chain of title. So let's assume everything checks out. I send you a check for $2,300. I send the treasurer a check for $200. I own it free and clear. And now, Gary, I'm going to sell it in 30 days or less and to make a cash flow like a rental home. So I have a built-in best buyer. Do you know who it is?
Who's that?
The neighbors. The
Oh,
neighbors. So I'll
okay.
send out neighbor letters saying, hey, here's your opportunity. Protect your privacy, protect your views, know your neighbor. So oftentimes the neighbors will buy. Now, if the neighbors
Hmm.
pass, I'll go to my buyers list. The buyers list passes. I'll go to a little website you may have never heard of. It's called Craigslist. It's 15th most trafficked
Oh
website in
yeah.
the United States. I'll go to one I know you've heard of called Meta or Facebook buy sell groups in the
Yeah.
marketplace. And then I'll go to the lands, land.com, landandfarm.com, landsamerica.com, landmodo.com, landflip.com, landhub.com. These are platforms where people buy and sell raw land. But the secret is I'm going to make it irresistible. So all I'm going to ask for from my buyer is a $2,500 down payment for them to control your parcel in Florida. And then I'll make it a car
Mhm.
payment. Let's say $297 a month and 9% interest for the next 84 months. So it's a one-time sale. I'm going to get my money out on the down payment. I could go
Mhm.
6 to 10 months out. And now I'm getting $297 a month, 9% interest for the next 84 months. Again, no renters, no rehabs, no renovations, no rodents. And because I'm not dealing with a tenant, I'm exempt from Dodd-Frank, RESPA, and the SAFE Act, all this onerous real estate legislation. So the simple game that we can all play is, can we create enough of these land notes where our passive income then exceeds our fixed expenses and we escape the trap of solo economic dependency, and we can move up Maslow's hierarchy of needs into self-actualization and have the time and money and freedom to figure out what we really want to do in life.
Yeah. What's amazing is I'm just trying to think when this goes back to probably the early to mid 2000s. I had built a house probably 7 years before, and in a cul-de-sac, and it was one vacant lot. It just sat there, and it was like this maybe the smallest one that they went down a hill, that kind of thing. But it was nice having their privacy. The kids would go in the woods and build tree houses and go down and fish by the pond and do all have all kinds of fun. So I approached my neighbor. I said, "Hey, how would you like to buy this lot? You and I we'll just make some crazy low offer. We'll split it 50-50, get an attorney to go do the redrawing of the lines and file all that stuff with the city and pay all those people." And he said, "Sure." It was like no argument, no debate. He's like, "Hey, sounds like a good idea." So we did. We approached the sellers and said, "Hey," and we were dumb. We were like, we said, "We know this is a bad offer, but we don't really need it. We just want the privacy." And he said, "Sure." I'm like, two yeses in a row from something I really didn't think was going to happen. And I probably was a horrible salesperson at the time, but it worked. It's exactly what we wanted. And when we eventually sold that property years later, I mean, our house with the additional land, and one of the reasons that allowed us to sell it so much more easily was because we had such a big lot and we had the woods and the privacy and access to the pond and the whole 9 yards. It was like nobody else had that.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. I bet your
yeah,
return was crazy.
yeah, yeah. Well, and also, yeah, the prices that were still going up. Then remember that that was a
Yeah,
few years before the big recession, so we were kind of hitting it at the right time.
yeah,
So, but
absolutely.
hey, now when it comes to what are some of the other benefits? I guess what are the top three, five, seven reasons why someone should be creating passive income with investing in raw land? I mean, are there tax benefits? Obviously, the gain on you buy low and sell high. But are there other factors, other benefits in addition to the profit that would entice people?
Yeah, so the profit's crazy. Our average ROI is 300 to 1,000%, 300% on cash and 1,000% on owner financing.
Hmm.
So 90% of this business is automated with software, inexpensive virtual assistants, and then
Hmm.
software on the back end. So the last thing I want anyone to do is create another job for themselves. So that's the big benefit is, creating this passive income machine is
Hmm.
really uh, the goal, right?
Hmm.
And those three levers of scale, which is other people's time, software and automation, and other people's
Hmm.
money. And so once you get your confidence and you've done a bunch of deals, it's really easy to go out and get other people's money. So I think that's, one of the biggest benefits is just creating this passive income machine and this cash flowing machine. I think another one is just the fact that you can do it from anywhere in the world.
Hmm.
You don't have to be geographically based in a certain market. So it frees you up to live your best life and you can travel around the world. I've had many clients actually quit their jobs and travel around the world. They just take their laptop and they talk to their team and they give somebody limited power of attorney to sign the deeds when someone pays off their note, and a virtual mailbox, and they're running their business from anywhere in the
Yeah.
world. So you can take advantage of all types of wonderful benefits.
Hmm.
Look, maybe, you can live like a multimillionaire in Bali for $2,500 a month. It's not that many
Hmm.
land notes, and you can run this business. So that's another big benefit, I think, is just the fact you can do it from
Yeah.
anywhere in the world. I think another one is the fact that just the asset alone is really unique. So during the pandemic, didn't affect me at all. I
Hmm.
already been working out of my home, so I don't see anybody.
Hmm.
It was, my life didn't change at all. And I always ask myself for this question that Jeff Bezos always asks is if everything's going to change, which it is, well, what's not going to change? And I always think what's
Right.
not going to change is people are always going to want a real asset. They're always going to want a good deal. And so inflation,
Yeah.
interest rates, it doesn't matter because we're paying cash for these properties. If people default on the land, we don't care. They've lowered our cost basis. We resell it. There's no cost of foreclosure because we use land contracts. And so there's so many benefits as just far as your quality of life in
Yeah.
running this business.
Did you know that you can participate in class every Monday? We call it Monday Night Live, 7 p.m. Eastern, with me and dozens of other investor agents from around the country, in fact, the world. Every Monday, totally free. No selling, no recruiting, just straight up education on anything and everything in real estate. And we have a lot of good guests coming on once or twice a month, bringing in expertise on subjects like how to buy a house with crypto. Okay. How about them apples? What about AI? How's AI affecting our business? How about the metaverse, blockchain processing? We're already using it in title work. So come on to Monday Night Live. Be ready to take notes and ask questions because it's live and engaging, and you get to participate by asking questions and meeting others. So we'll see you there. Go to GaryRealEstateWithGaryWilson.com. Click on the resource tab, drop down, and you'll see Monday Night Live. And in there, you can see one of the most recent classes. But more importantly, you can register for class as many as you want going up to like the end of the year, I believe. So in any case, do that. We'll see you on Monday Night Live. Look forward to meeting you in person. Take care. I love being an entrepreneur and I love being able to work from it. I've been doing that since 2009. And I was running 5 businesses at one point too, but I realized I don't have to have an office. I don't have to go to an office. And
Yeah.
so I didn't. And now with the pandemic, that's like all of a sudden the cat's out of the bag. Everybody realizes, wow, we don't have to pay all this overhead for all these physical locations, which is something I really like about what you're doing is if you think about other traditional business models like franchise models and fast food, for example, you've got a lot of physical infrastructure overhead. And you and we have none of that. We have no building cost, no rent, no mortgage, no property tax, no gas bill, light bill, water bill, no garbage collection, no maintenance, no repairs, none of that stuff. We don't have any of it. So our most of our gross revenue is pretty much our net revenue.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. I mean, I think my average client, their monthly overhead, including virtual assistants and software, is a 1,500 a month, 1,500 to 2,000 a month, depending on how fancy they're getting with their software.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, let's talk a little bit about your clients. It's not, I'm gathering you help others do this, and just like a lot of us, we realize once we figured something out, we've got a great valuable asset or tool or method or strategy we can share with others. So you wrote a book called Dirt Rich, and I got to tell you, I've interviewed a lot of people over the years. That title is my favorite title, bar none. Dirt Rich.
Well,
You
thank you.
totally, yeah, you just completely flipped it around. So tell us a little bit about the book. Who's it written for? Who's your avatar, your most likely to read person out there, and maybe what are some of the key things in there?
Yeah, so I mean, the book is really going to give you an overview of the land business, just what
Hmm.
we're talking about now, and it also talks about my story and a lot of the mistakes that I made, just thinking like, oh, the more money I make, the happier I'm going to be, which
Hmm.
really is not the case. But I had to learn the hard way. So So, I have my own cautionary tale in there for people to read about, so they don't have to experience it for themselves. And then just a
Hmm.
step by step, hopefully entertaining way of going about and working their own land business and teaching them how to do it.
Yeah. And now does it, so it gets, you mentioned the system. So I guess there's multiple systems involved in automation. So does it go into all of that also and how to actually scale it, learn small and grow big? Is that part of it also?
Yeah, it's going to give you more of an overview than it is going
Okay.
to give you all that detail because I wrote it in 2018, and today, the systems and the software, they all
Uh,
change. So
yeah.
that's going to be completely different than what I was doing in 2018. That being said, I actually provide software for our clients so that they can, there's a set and forget it payment system called geekpay.io. And then
Okay.
there's the uh, front end piece that manages the business called lgpass.com. And, those two subscriptions alone are going to get you, very far.
Yeah. Well, that sounds awesome. So really, really what you're doing, it sounds like is you're taking your tried and true plan that, you know, creates freedom for you, allows people to essentially leave the corporate gig and, essentially fire the boss. But is it story format? Does that come out in the story in the book? That whole, you know, I'm, I
It,
know not the
it
detail, but like
does. Yeah.
okay.
It's an
Awesome.
easy read. It really is.
Well, I appreciate you sharing all this. I know we're going to get short on time here pretty quickly, but I have a head full of questions. So if we're okay, I'll continue a
Sure.
little bit. So you're in Arizona. You mentioned you can do this from anywhere, which is very appealing because I like to travel. I just was in Germany for 12 days last month, and I, I don't like to work when I'm away, but if when you're an entrepreneur, you always have to communicate. It's not like I'm working all the time, but I was keeping up with the communication pretty much. Um, but the cool thing is you know, the old adage of I want to work from the beach, you can actually do this. And but here's where I'm going with this to kind of end around is um, when it comes to the land itself, are there parts of the country? I'm assuming this is all U.S. based, but if it's not, let me know. Are there geographically the areas that you're more likely to focus on, or the areas that are less likely for you to focus on? And I'm gathering you must have some type of tool to do that. Am I on the right track there? Or
Yeah, it's a great question. What are the best markets?
Mhm.
So even though you can do it from anywhere in the world, I just buy US land. And so, I mean, there's billions of acres available. For the skeptical listener, like, well, if it's so great, why is he teaching it? Right. And
Yeah.
I remember my wife asking me the same thing. And so I put on my investment banking hat. I thought, well, let's just see how big the market is. I mean,
Mhm.
there's billions of acres available of raw land. So you, me,
Mhm.
a million people could be in this niche. We're all going to run out of money before we run out of deal flow. And there's no big money in it. There's no private equity groups or hedge funds as well. They
Mhm.
have too much money. As a matter of fact, they're like buying productive farmland at 8%. So
Yeah.
anyways, I digress. But I mean, Gary, let's just face it. Nobody wakes up and thinks to themselves, boy, I'd like some raw land in Iowa today, unless you
Yeah.
live in Iowa. So we're going to focus on the Sunshine States, Florida,
Mhm.
Arizona, New Mexico, Texas,
Yeah.
Nevada, California, uh,
Yeah.
Colorado, Oregon, Washington. And those are the sunshine states. Those are the fast growing states, maybe a little bit in the Midwest, some of those treat areas as well. You're gonna be able to great deals. And there's just, a ton of inexpensive raw land for people to invest in.
Yeah. Now, does it run the gamut from like individual building lots all the way to just pure raw land that was like never used for farming, never built on, just native raw land? Is it kind of all over the map like that, or are there
It's
specific?
it's yeah, it's all over the map. I mean, I don't really focus on infill lots because I can't buy those at 25, 30 cents on the dollar. And
Yeah.
I find those so we're making our money on the buy. I don't
Yeah.
want to speculate. That being said, if I can get a great deal on a building lot, I will. I just don't focus on it. And those are going to be a higher priced strategy as well. So you get to come in with a
Yeah.
lot more capital. Nothing wrong with it. I just don't focus
Right.
on it.
Yeah. And are people generally starting with their own cash, or I mean, if I'm thinking, heck, if you can buy something for $2,500, you could probably use a credit card for that. I mean, maybe not directly, but do a balance transfer or cash withdrawal. I mean, is it like that, or are people more likely to use their own cash sitting in like a checking account at the bank kind of thing, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you know, people can start with $500 and get started in this
Mhm.
business. Um, I had a client, Paul, in upstate. He was buying property in upstate New York. He was sending out offer letters, and so he couldn't afford to buy the property. I think it was like 10 grand at the time. So he's
Hmm.
like, I don't have the money. I said, Paul, send out neighbor letters and see what happens. So he sends out the
Hmm.
neighbor letters, and a neighbor says, "Oh yeah, I'll buy it for 20." So he's like, "Well, now what do I do?" I said, "Well, take the 20,000 from the neighbor, and then take the 10,000, pay off your seller, and now you've got an infinite return on investment. And when you record the deeds, say record this deed first, record this deed second, and do a simultaneous close." So you really don't need a lot of money. I think it helps in the beginning that if you
Hmm.
have more capital, you have access to more capital, but you certainly don't need it.
Yeah. Okay. Now we have the book, which is sort of gives you the plan, but it's high level. These are it's like the what you have to do, but probably not the how, which is the actual individual steps. So can people like if they go to the website, the landgeek.com, or let's say they just reach out to you via email or something, what if someone's read the book, what's a good next step for that person?
I think once they've read the book, a good next step is probably going to be listen to the podcast,
Okay.
the Art of Passive Income podcast every week. It's myself and our coaches. And we talk about a pain point in the land business. And then if you are really serious about it, we have some courses that you can invest in yourself at the landgeek.com. But I would say, start learning. We have a lot of free material as well. So if you have more time than money, you can definitely get started for free. If you have more money than time, certainly you can invest in shortcutting that learning curve as well.
Okay. Now, how about the timing? I get this question a lot. And I know the answer because I've been in the business now for, as of this week, 1986. What will that be? 30, is that 30, 38 years? 38
38
years.
years.
That's crazy. But, I know the answer is, hey, the best time is right now. But people ask, I'm going to ask you anyways, if you notice in the last 20 years since you've been doing this, you've seen the market at the high, you saw it at the recession at the low, and you saw the market come back up again. And now here we are, and who knows what's going to happen because we think we got it figured out, and then the government prints more money. It just
Right.
kicks the
Right.
can down the street, so to speak. But what can you tell people about timing, if timing is even a factor in investing in land, you know?
Yeah, it's not a factor because, again, we don't have any debt. So interest rates can do what they want. I think our biggest risk is if you're already in the land business and you have a bunch of
Hmm.
land notes and there's high unemployment. And now people are saying, hey, I can't make my payments to you anymore. Again, not a big deal. But I think in those scenarios, if it's a great time to be in the land business because everything's on sale. So from my
Yeah.
point of view, it goes through the cycle of it's easy to buy and it might be a little bit more difficult to sell. Then we have equilibrium where it's easy to buy, it's easy to sell. And then we have a hot market where it's harder to buy, but everything's flying off the shelf. And so right now, uh, we're definitely seeing equilibrium where a few years ago it was harder to buy and easier to sell. Coming out of the recession, it was really great to buy, but a little bit more difficult to get the pricing right to entice people to buy.
Yeah. Well, one really good thing, and our favorite here is investors, real estate investors, particularly like with land, is there's a huge shortage of housing in our country right now. I mean, some estimates are as high as 7 million housing units. It's gigantic. You can't solve that in the resale market. You've got to have new construction. And what does new construction need? They need land. Developers need land. So, for everybody out here listening, whether you're a real estate agent or a real estate investor or both, I think you should be both. Let me qualify this. Even if you're a full-time professional in some career, you got a W-2 job, there's no reason why you can't get your real estate license. It's easy to do. It does enhance your investing business. It's not a requirement, not necessary. It just gives you access to more people and more tools and more strategies and so forth. But in any case, having said that, um, think about what we just talked about. And you can just Google all this and do your own research for your own particular area and to see what the shortages of housing, determine what the needs are, and decide to play a role in that. Commit to making yourself part of the solution and profiting in that way is, that's the American dream. That's the American way. Never underestimate the resiliency of the American spirit to figure out what to do and how to do it and why to do it and when to do it. And you've got a great person here, Mark Podolsky, who's already doing it from beautiful Scottsdale, Arizona, and he's doing it all over the place. So, Mark, you really are. You've done this in Florida, East Coast, wherever the data tells you to be. You've done this in multiple markets, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there you go, guys. And not only that, and the reason I said that is because I hear this all the time. Well, my market's different. Where I do I'm telling you, that's a statement that might have been relevant 2 generations ago, but not anymore. With the availability of software and hardware, the technology and the knowledge base that's out there, and the fact that, by the way, investors 56% of the time invest out of state. Okay, there's no reason to not participate in something like this. It's a lot less expensive than buying improved upon land, which is buildings and so forth and so on. Many fewer headaches. All right, and I'm looking at we're doing this podcast, guys, but Mark and I are on Zoom, so I can see Mark and I came from the same. By the way, Mark, I did mergers and acquisitions too in banking. But I was on the IT side, merging systems, doing analysis and merging systems. But here's the
Yeah.
thing: for anybody listening, if you're just listening, you're not watching this. Mark has no gray hair. I've got all the gray hair. I did all the traditional crap with rentals and tenants and all that stuff, and Mark didn't. He has no gray hair. I think I'm going to go to Mark's side of the game and do the land deal. Maybe I'll reverse my gray hair. You know. So,
There you
hey,
go.
Mark, all humor aside, is there anything we didn't touch on that you think people should know or hear? Like, uh, how can we, anything, chapter in a book, consultation of, you mentioned the podcast real quick. What's the podcast name again?
The art of passive income.
Art of Passive Income. Okay, guys. So you got the podcast to go to. Okay. Anything else? How can people get a hold of you? What can we give them to help them further on their journey?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give them a link. I'll give you a link to the free book. They just have to pay for shipping. And if we get this updated in time, maybe we'll get just a free audiobook for them, which would be even easier. But
Okay.
my team, we're going through a transition right now, so hopefully we'll get that done. But either way, it's, I don't know, what is it, $9 or something? It's a good investment.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone's ever bought a book and thought, oh, that was the worst investment. Your ROI on on any kind of learning is always massive. So I would say that, whenever I want a podcast, I like to close with this Zig Ziglar quote, which is, if
Hmm.
you'll do for the next 3 to 5 years what other people won't do, you'll be able to do for the rest of your life what other people can't do. And notice he didn't say 3 to 5 months or 3 to 5 days.
Hmm.
It's 3 to 5 years. But if you
Yeah.
commit to something, it doesn't have to be land investing. It can be anything, but just commit to it and stick
Yeah.
with it. Because on a long enough time scale, everyone gets paid. And so if this resonates with you, great. If it doesn't, find something that does, but stick with that 3 to 5 years, head down, and you'll see how it transforms your life completely.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that because that's from the heart. And it's not like you're like specifically promoting any particular product or service. You're just speaking the truth from your heart. And I and all the listeners appreciate you doing that. So guys, the book is called Dirt Rich, and we will put that link that we have for Mark. We're going to put that in the show notes. So if you're driving, don't worry, you don't have to write anything down. When you get home, pull it up on the show notes. Just go to you can go to realestatewithgarywilson.com, click on resources, and in there you'll see the podcast. You'll see Mark's podcast in there. And the book is again is called Dirt Rich. Mark's name is Mark Podolsky, Podolsky. Okay. And the website is www.landgeek.com. Altogether,
Yeah. The landgeek.com. Yeah.
thelandgeek.com. There you go. It looks like you're on Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook, and it's just remember the Land Geek for the social media handles, guys, and you have all that. Um, so Mark, I just want to thank you again for doing this. You definitely um, gave a lot of gold nuggets here. You gave the big picture, you gave an actual three-part strategy, and you gave some very relevant, meaningful, heartfelt advice to people. So guys, this is your opportunity to participate. And by the way, when you're done listening to the podcast, when you're back home off the road, please leave a review. Your review is our currency. I can't emphasize that enough, and I hate to ask for it, but the reality is when you have a good podcast, leave a review. It's free to you. We do this as a community service. Indirectly, we might get clients and things like that. But the reality is we're doing this on our own time, on our own dime, and your review means the world to us. So really do appreciate it. And while you're there, go visit thelandgeek.com. And the last stop you'll make, especially if you're a real estate agent listening to this and you want to know how to participate, go visit globalinvestoragent.com. Click on the learn more button, and you'll get to talk to somebody and figure out how to make this part of your model to serve other people, other investors particularly. Right? You can play a role here if you put your head down and, like Mark said, work for 3 to 5 years. I promise you'll help other people succeed, just like Zig Ziglar says, helping if other people get what they want, i.e. land, and you'll be able to get plenty of what you want, i.e. land, as an investor and an agent. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you again, Mark. You guys take care of yourselves. God bless you and your families. And we will see you on the next Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Massive Passive Cash Flow. Be sure to go to realestatewithgarywilson.com to join our community and start building wealth today.